Hello and welcome to the chapel here at Barney School. My name is Mr. Dawson and I'm the Director of Music here at Barney. And in this short video, I'm going to introduce you to the chapel organ and more generally, how the pipe organ works. Now, the organ is one of the most amazing instruments. In fact, the composer, Mozart, famous composer, once referred to the organ as the king of instruments. And it doesn't get that name lightly. It's an instrument that's able to play from the quietest sounds right through to some of the loudest sounds you could possibly make, all made by one person with no amplification. It's an absolutely amazing instrument. So in this little video, you're going to sort of find out how the organ works and a little bit of the technical wizardry that goes on behind the scenes to make the king of instruments sing. First things first, how does an organ actually make a noise? Well, it's a wind instrument, so somewhere along the way we need air, pressurized air, to get into the pipes. And this particular organ has well over 1,000 pipes. It's hard to believe, just looking at it, that it would contain so many pipes. In fact, the largest instrument in the world contains well over 33,000 pipes. How amazing is that? So, anyway, back to this instrument. How does it make a noise? Well, as we can see, if I just turn around and start playing it like a piano, it makes no sound whatsoever. And that's because there's no air being supplied to the instrument. Now, about 150, 200 years ago, instruments were actually hand pumped, and the bellows had to be pumped by hand, usually by a small chorister who happened to be around and not too busy, and that little child would be sent off to go and pump the bellows. But we don't do that anymore. Thank goodness. So, what we have over here is a button. And what that button does is it turns on a blower inside the instrument itself. And that blower supplies air to pressurized bellows, to create some air pressure. And then, when I press a note, that air is sent to the particular pipe to make a sound. A little bit like playing a recorder or a clarinet. Okay? So, even though we've got the air in the instrument now, I've turned it on, still don't have any sound. And that's where the second most important thing in terms of actually making a sound on the organ lies. And that's these things on either side of what we would call the organ console. Okay, so it's a little bit like a sort of aeroplane console or cockpit. So this is what we would call the console. And these little things on the side are what we call stops. And that's where we get the phrase pulling out all the stops, by the way. If anyone ever says that to you, why don't you pull out all the stops? Then that's where we get that phrase from the organ. So these stops on the side of the instrument control different sounds and also different pitches of sound. So if I pull one out here that says flute, then it makes a sort of soft fluty sound. And now that I've pulled this stop out, I've accessed a particular rank of pipes which will make that sound. So air is able to get into the pipe once I've pressed the note. And lo and behold, so we're able to have some quite soft sounds on the instrument. And of course, the more stops that I pull out, if I pull out all the ones over on this side and all the ones over on this side, well, certainly a lot of them anyway, we're going to get quite a full sound. Fantastic noise. So, what have we got so far? We've got air, pressurized air being sent into the instrument, and we've got stops on the side which access different pipes. Next thing, we've got our keyboards. Now, to all intents and purposes, the organ plays the same as a piano would do, in that the keyboards look the same. We've got all the same notes, so we've got middle C in the middle here, and I can sort of play notes as I would on the piano. But there are some subtle differences. The first, obviously, as you can see, is we've got two keyboards here. And on the organ, these are called manuals. So we've got two manuals to play. Why do we have two manuals? Well, it allows us to access different sounds on the instrument. So that's why we've got multiple keyboards. And once again, this is a sort of relatively standard size instrument with two keyboards. Some will have three, or maybe four. The organ in Durham Cathedral that we go and visit sometimes with our chapel choir has 4 manuals. The largest instrument in the UK, well, joint largest, both the Royal Albert Hall and the organs at Liverpool Cathedral, have 5 manuals, and the largest organ in the world over in America has 7 keyboards, would you believe it? And as you go up, there are so many keyboards, they start having to become vertical so you can play them, otherwise they'd be too far away. So, different manuals or keyboards create different sounds, as you can see here. So I could play quite loudly on one keyboard and quite softly on another. So, manuals and stops. But the other reason we have manuals and the other way in which the organ is very much different to the piano is that we can't control the volume of the organ by how hard or soft we actually play the key itself. This is why the piano has its name. Its full name is actually the pianoforte, meaning soft, loud. That was one of the piano's most amazing features. It could play different dynamics just by the touch of the player. But the organ can't do that. If I pull out some stops here, you'll notice that no matter how hard I hit the key, the dynamic of the actual sound doesn't change. So, 2 main differences between the piano and the organ. Firstly, that we have multiple keyboards that we would play at any given time, and the other is that we don't control the dynamic by how hard or soft we hit the notes. We control the dynamic by our choice of stops. So, if I were to play a chord, I can add stops by pulling them out to make the sound louder, like this. And likewise, if I take stops away and I push them back in, it gets quieter. So we change the volume on the organ by adding or removing stops. There is one other way that we can change the dynamic of sounds on the organ, and that's just down here. And this is what's called the swell pedal. And the reason for this is that the pipes of this keyboard, this top keyboard here, this keyboard, by the way, is called the swell keyboard on this instrument. And the reason it's called the swell is because all of the pipes for this keyboard are actually contained within sort of a box. And in front of the box there are a series of shutters. And if I close and open this pedal here, you can probably hear it. It's opening and closing those shutters. So when the swell box is shut, like this, the sounds on the swell keyboard are much quieter. But as I press that pedal forwards, the swell pedal, it opens the shutters on the box, which allows the sound to come out and get louder. So that is one of the few ways on the organ that we can actually get a sort of natural crescendo, a natural increase or decrease in sound. So here's it with the box shut, and I'll open the pedal and you'll be able to hear that it gets louder. There we go. So, unlike the piano, the ways in which we control the actual volume of the organ are by the number of stops we have out, and sometimes the type of stop, and also the use of that swell pedal. Now, what are the other differences between the piano and the organ? Well, it's very hard to avoid this one. The organ is one instrument that you actually play, I suppose a little bit in some ways like a drum kit, you play with your feet. So, down here, and I'm hoping I've been able to cut away to a shot of what's called the pedal board here, you'll see a variety of keys that are played with the feet. And if you have a look, they look pretty much exactly like a piano keyboard, but bigger. So we've got the white natural notes, and then we've got sharps and flats on this instrument, which are also painted black, a little bit like on the keyboards themselves. And much like a piano keyboard, works exactly the same way, except you play it with your toes and also your heels. So this is how we would create a sound on the pedal board, and it would go like this. And the pedals are where we find some of the lowest deepest bass sounds on the instrument. And together, this is how we would play the organ, with both our hands and our feet. So compared to piano music, where you'd have 2 lines of music, organ music is traditionally written on 3 different lines. 1 for your right hand, 1 for your left hand, and 1 for your feet. And in traditional day-to-day playing, this is how it works. So if I were playing a hymn in chapel, I would pull out some sort of fairly meaty, loud sounds, ready to accompany some absolutely cracking singing. And I would play the bass line with my feet, and it might sound something a little bit like this. So, there we go. Recap of what we've got so far. Air is pushed into the instrument, and then we choose what pipes we want by using these stops on the sides here. They also control the dynamic of the instrument, whether it's loud or quiet. We've got some pipes that are found within what's called a swell box, so we can change the dynamic by using the swell pedal. We play with our feet on the organ on what's called the pedal board, and that works exactly the same as playing a keyboard with your hands, except you play it with your feet. The final little interesting thing, and I'm going to hopefully once again cut away now to some of the pictures of the stops. And what you'll notice is that when you look at the stops, they've got names, and some of those names might be familiar to you. They sound like orchestral instruments. So we've got things like flutes and trumpets and oboes, and on this instrument things like a violone, which is a sort of cello type sound. But also they've got numbers on. Now, these numbers actually refer to the pitch of the pipe, and in particular, they measure the longest pipe in that sort of sound by length. So any stop that's got a number 8 on it means that the longest pipe in that stop is 8 feet long. And if it's got a number 4 on it, it means the longest pipe is 4 feet long, and if it's got a number 2, 2 feet long, and so on and so forth. Now, as we know from different sized instruments, the longer or bigger the instrument, the lower the sound. So what this should tell us is that stops that have a number 8 written on them are lower in pitch than those that have a number 4 on them. Now, stops that have a number 8 on them, and this is really important, 8-foot stops, play at concert pitch. And what that means is that when we play a C, a middle C, it sounds like a middle C on the piano. If I play a 4-foot stop, however, it sounds an octave higher. So despite the fact I'm playing middle C, it's actually sounding the same as an octave higher. And the same again with a 2-foot stop. It plays 2 octaves higher than an 8-foot stop. And at the other end of the instrument, we actually have what's called a 16-foot stop, and that plays an octave lower than sort of standard pitch. And on this instrument, most of those are confined to the pedal board. So here's middle C on the pedal board, and it would sound a little bit like this. Here's a 16-foot stop. And right at the bottom of the pedal board, that means we can get a whole octave lower than actually sort of written, and it sounds like this. Nice and low, which is fantastic. And what that means on an organ like this is that we can actually access multiple different pitches of sound at the same time. So I wonder if you can hear when I add them on. So here's an 8-foot stop to start us off. Then I'll add a 4-foot stop, an octave higher, but we're still keeping that principal sound. A 2-foot stop, and also a 16-foot stop. So we've actually got 4 different octaves playing at once, which is amazing, and that's what sort of creates that really deep, thick, full sound on the organ. So when we pull out stops of different pitches, we end up with that great sound that sounds like a typical organ would, like this. Now, you probably have also noticed that there are some stops on here which have got weird numbers, like 2 2/3, 1 3/5. And I wonder if you can sort of think about what that might mean in terms of a sound. If an 8-foot pipe is of 1 pitch, and then 4 foot is an octave higher, and then 2 foot is an octave higher again, What might a 2 2/3 or 1 3/5 mean? Well, it actually means that it plays a different interval. So if I'm playing on a 2 2/3 pipe, here's my standard C. It actually plays a different note entirely. It plays a G. So on the organ, we're also able to get these different combinations of higher pitched sounds, which sound like this. So, hopefully that's given you a little bit of an understanding as to how the organ works. To finish off, I'm just going to point out some of the more unusual features on this instrument. Well, not unusual, but you might have questions as to what they are. You'll see underneath both keyboards, we've got some buttons here, and these are what are called pistons. And pistons allow us to change the stops quickly on an organ. So instead of having to reach over and pull out different stops midway through a piece, we're able to press pistons and they change the stops quickly. So for example, I can play a hymn like this, and if I press the lowest piston, number 1, it brings out some soft sounds. And throughout the course of me just playing a bit of laudable hopefulness again, I'll go up through the pistons, which should make it louder, and back down again. So like this. You'll also see that those pistons are replicated down here near the pedals. So we've got these little sort of mushroomly shaped toe studs. And once again, these allow us, if you can see, to change the stops nice and quickly. So they're moving on their own. How amazing. So, that is how the organ works. Now, here at Barney, we're really lucky to have an instrument like this in the chapel. And the organ is used to accompany our daily services in the chapel. And it's also used to accompany our amazing chapel choir when they sing choral matins and different services throughout the school year. Because we're so lucky to have an organ like this, we always think it's fantastic if young people and pupils at the school want to actually learn the organ. It's such a great instrument, but it's one of those instruments that you might not immediately think of when learning an instrument. So we really do encourage people to learn the organ here. We have a young organist scheme, and that allows pupils who have got to a certain degree on the piano to start learning the organ for free. But we also offer organ lessons outside of the young organist scheme. So if you wanted to learn the organ, and even if you'd never played the piano in your life but really wanted to learn the organ, absolutely fine, go for it. We would really encourage you to start learning the organ. It's such a fantastic instrument, a really quirky instrument, not an easy one to practice at home, but certainly a great instrument, and we would really encourage you to do so. Thank you for tuning in to this video on an introduction to the pipe organ here at Barney School, and I hope to see you for some of our other events here in the Barney Festival of Music 2020.